No, I'm very, very pleased to be here. One of the main reasons I'm pleased to be here and very committed to the Thai organization, although I've only been associated with it for the last little while, is that I've certainly lived through 3 startups and lived through my father's startups as well. And so it's something very near and dear to my heart, my family's heart. And very, very briefly, I'm not going to do a very formal presentation, but just very briefly so that you know a little bit about me. You may have there may be a bio there, but I did a bachelor's of engineering physics and worked in aerodynamics engineering in Europe and the US and in Asia. Did an MBA at University of London, then went into consulting in the UK and in Canada for Deloitte Price Waterhouse, and ultimately focusing on healthcare, medtech, pharma, regulatory review, and things of that nature. So my comments are not going to be limited in any way, although my business experience is focused on that. I'm not going to limit my comments to that. I'm trying to make them very general. And then 3 startups in oncology, in radiology, and web-based electronic medical records and clinical trials with a stint in venture capital in between. And then 5 years in life sciences, running the life sciences practice for IBM in Canada. And a very detailed set of experiences that will bring for you if you know anything about IBM, a wonderful company. And from that point, I actually have now, in my current position, and one of the reasons that I've been asked here is because of my startup experience, but also because I am president and CEO of HTX, which is a medical technology investment company. We invest in seed companies and in seed capital in companies, and also to attract multinational companies to set up global activities here. So I see a lot of deal flow. I work with Mars Innovation, so I work with OCE, I work with federal companies. And so what I'm going to try and bring to you today is just a sense of what it was like for me to be in distill some of the experiences that I had, but also give you a sense in our discussions and other things about the kinds of companies that I see. And I just want to warn you, what Dave's going to say, what everyone's going to say. It's great to try and learn from others, but be wary. My disclaimer is that at my dad's funeral, one of his business partners said that in reviewing Harvard Business Review, one of the common traits of successful entrepreneurs is unreasonable optimism. That's true. I said to myself, but one of the common traits of unsuccessful entrepreneurs is unreasonable optimism as well. So there are going to be some principles that you learn, but success in entrepreneurialism is a combination of best practices, but also luck and determination and a number of different things. So I look forward to, mine's perhaps more informal presentation, but I look forward to sharing it. Thanks. What I want to do, I don't want to cover the same things that have been covered, and it's hard not to. I've got some things that are redundant, but I just want to give you a couple of sort of colorful anecdotes that you might find interesting. Now, some of these are obviously going to reflect the fact that I worked in the technology and the medical technology field. Can't help that. That's where I come from. And so they don't all translate, but many of them do. One of the things I also want to say, well, let me just start off with one of the characteristics of an entrepreneur is being a pig. And that comes from the anecdote about breakfast. And the chicken is involved in breakfast, and the pig is committed. The pig dies to get onto the breakfast table, right? Yeah. And that's a very old joke, but it's a very good joke. In fact, I read something just yesterday or the other day that said that venture capitalists only invest in pigs. They only invest in people that are fully committed, that have skin in the game, and so on. And you'll find that if you ever go and ask for someone for money, they will require you to be involved fully. And I was reflecting on Dave's comment about risk-taking, and I have to respectfully disagree in the following way. When people think that they've got a job at a big company and it's comfortable just to be there, keep earning their salary, and their paycheck's going to come in, and so on and so on, it's a big difference between going out there and staring at, for example, I feel like I'm at one of my startup companies and I'm looking at the 85 people in the room, and I know that person's kid's going to school, that person's kid's at university, all these different things. They just bought a new house, and how many times have you got this, just as you're trying to raise money, you've got this person coming in and saying, I'm going to buy a new house, and is this a good time to buy a house? And, oh my God. So I think the difference, this shade I would put on it, is that entrepreneurs must be risk takers. They have to be risk takers, but they are thoughtful risk takers. In other words, that they assess the strengths and weaknesses of the situation, the benefits, and they fool themselves into believing that they understand what those risks are. So it's not about, as Dave was saying, it's not about blindly going out and just taking risks. It's actually understanding the situation in a way that other people don't, and therefore you're willing to commit to this endeavor because you believe the benefits are going to be there if you execute your plan properly. So it's a commitment and a form of thoughtful risk taking. The way I phrase it to people who like to say at parties or something like that, I'm an entrepreneur, or they say they are an entrepreneur. I said, have you ever mortgaged your house to make payroll? That's being an entrepreneur. Okay, think about that. Think about that. Think about that gal who came to me and says, this is a good time to buy a house. And I know that we have 6 months of money and we've got 8 months of development. And that's a very difficult situation to be in. And when you have to mortgage your house to make payroll, you would only do it because under thoughtful processes, you believe you're going to get there and you're going to have a better business case and be able to raise money and have prospects, et cetera, et cetera. But I love that, if you haven't mortgaged your house to make payroll, you're not an entrepreneur, because almost everyone has to do it. There's also a good one, that entrepreneurship as being a calling. One of my, you find when you go through entrepreneurship and you go to all these conferences, you talk to people, you talk to VCs, everyone comes up with little anecdotes. And some of them are because they're colorful anecdotes and nice stories, you can remember them, and they become meaningful. And Dave presented several of them. There's a fellow by the name of Steve Blank, who some of you may know, a successful tech entrepreneur. If you don't know him, subscribe to his blog. He's got a great blog and got lots of very good anecdotes. One of the ones he told was about a kid from his Columbia Business School, or wherever he taught, came up and said, I'd like you to help me decide what job to take. And he says, oh, okay, well, what are your options? He says, well, I've got Monitor Group or McKinsey's. Let's say McKinsey's as a consulting job. He says, okay, yeah, I know the company, that's great, great opportunity, all these great things about that. He says, what's your other one? And he says, well, my other option is doing a startup with a friend of mine, and I'd like you to help me to choose. And Blank says, well, you've already chosen it. And he says, no, I'm telling you the two, and I want you to help me choose. He says, no, you've chosen, because you've described them both as a job. The one is a job, the other is a calling. You get up in the morning, when you see the opportunity, you just think for a year or for however length of time you think, I really think this needs to be done. It would be so great if this were done. You literally wake up in the middle of the night, and I don't mean in a bad way. You wake up in the middle of the night, you're in the morning shaving in the shower or wherever, and you're just saying, if we did it that way, that would be different. And really, it does pervade your whole being. And you need that kind of pervasiveness in order to have the stick-to-itiveness that's necessary to get it done, and so on. So Blank's anecdote is a very good one, and he's got many others. So, so those are the sorts of things about the pig. And just people were talking about different sizes of companies. I've worked in a 3-person company, and I've worked in a 400,000 person company, and I don't find them any different. And what I mean by that is, wherever I have been trying to create evidence-based, person-independent, repeatable, best practices. And it doesn't matter if I'm a 3-person company or if in my 400,000 person company. And also, I'm driven by the value that I see in the task. If I didn't see there was value in the task of working for IBM, I wouldn't have been there. If I was worried about San Palmisano cashing in the shares or something that's not appropriate, I wouldn't have been there. I'm interested in the task and task motivated. So just a side note on that. So another aspect of entrepreneurship, and particularly working in small companies, is the playing field is not level. You have to accept the fact that life is not fair. And if you have a problem with that, don't get into entrepreneurship. And what do I mean by that? Being an entrepreneur means you do whatever is required to meet an end goal. And you were saying about working for everyone else, that's sort of what I mean. We used to use the term, you do windows. You know how cleaning ladies say, well, I do everything, but I just don't do windows. Well, when you're in entrepreneurship, you do windows. I mean, you'll find as CEO of a company, I'm there vacuuming the boardroom before the board comes in to do the presentation. Why? Because it needed to be done and there was no one else around. So you just have to get over that. Some people go in for titles, they want to be big CEOs or something like this. You can't have it. Another example of that is when you're doing a big deal. You're this little tiny 15-person company and you're talking to Kodak or IBM or Sanofi or someone like that. And the frustration is that you have to do 90% of their paperwork and 90% of their scheduling and 90% of their everything in order for them to do the deal. And it's not fair, it's not right, and you're thinking, I'm dying, I'm working weekends, and these guys are out playing golf. That's life. But it's your business that you are working for. You're not working for them, you are working for your business by writing their contracts. Okay, so similarly, you may think, and I'll give you some books at the end that gave me really, really good models that I live by. And you know, as Scott Adams, the guy who created Dilbert, once said, the reason there are so many management books out there is there are no real best practices. If there were best practices, then there'd be one book, everyone would read it, and you didn't have to write any others, right? Almost all of those books are wrong, but every once in a while you'll see a set of high-level principles that help your mind get around the complexity of business, and I'll share some of those at the end. But one of them has to do with identifying early customers, launch customers, that are representative of your future market. And you need to service those customers all the way to the end, to the point where those launch customers realize the business benefits of your technology. Why do you care? You care because if they do, then you've got a great flagship customer to show all those other people and convince them to buy your stuff. If they don't realize the business benefit of what you're doing, if they don't realize it, then you will have nothing to show those other customers and convince them. You may find yourself doing 1,000 times more work than you ever expected to do for this customer and getting paid nothing or almost nothing for doing it. And you may think this is unfair, and you may think a whole bunch of things about this customer. The reality is, again, it's your business, not what they're getting. You are building your foundation of your business inside their business. So just get over it. That is not fair. It's about you building your business, no different than you writing your own software or whatever. And the other thing about life not being fair, and I always rejected this with my partners. I already had very different views. One is that VCs, venture capitalists or investors, are not trying to screw you. They are not trying to screw you. When they give you a term sheet, they say, look, here's a term sheet with all those terms on it. That's worth $10 million. Here you are. And your partners will look at this and say, oh my God, look at the ownership. Oh my God, look at the ratchets. They're trying to kill us. They're trying to screw us. No, they're not. They're trying to give you money. That's what they're trying to do. And if their terms really suck and you've got no alternatives, well, that's a reflection on your business. It's not a reflection on them. They are going to take what the market will bear, right? That's what they're going to try and get. But you need to see them as a source of money, not as a source of abuse. And now, one of the other things, and this is particularly medtech, people talk about, and in Canada, people talk about VCs. We need more VCs. We need a healthier VC section. VCs are almost irrelevant. Almost irrelevant. They are about 0.3% of the seed money that medtech companies get in the United States, as an example, according to the recent data. The rest of it comes from friends and family and angels. Okay, so I just want people to don't just knee-jerk think VCs, okay? Because number one, there aren't many here, and number two, they really aren't as big as people say. And we could have a long discussion on that. Another one, entitlement. Entitlement. Eliminate it. Get rid of it. And this goes to your modesty comment that you were making. You know, a CEO of a 3-person startup is not the same stature as the CEO of a $100 million company. And yet you will find in your milieu, you will find people who have CEO on their little business card and they start thinking like their CEO. And that's really death. When you start thinking about titles, start thinking about roles as opposed to outcome and results from the company. The only thing that counts is results. Titles don't matter. Nothing else matters. Results is important. And one phrase I use to remind myself of this, and a little bit broader thing about entitlement, is this idea that you have to earn the right to move to the next step. So a quick anecdote, we developed this oncology software, which was world-beating at the time, 1994, 95. World-beating. Happened to be but it happened to reflect some of the work done by an MD PhD named Annie Zelenitz at Stanford University and a couple other people. He happened to be practicing at Memorial Sloan Kettering, one of the most famous cancer hospitals in the world. We're in this little tiny business out in Pembina Highway in Winnipeg, and we've written this really cool software. And I call up Andy Zelenitz, I want him on my medical advisory board, and I say, Andy, we do this. He says, you do what? And I say, well, we do this and this. Remember your stuff in your graduate program? He says, yeah, but you guys actually did it? I just made sort of like mock-ups. You actually did it? He said, yes. And so he says, well, I got to get my other people. So they get on the phone, they ask us like 100 questions. Do you do this, 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 this? Yes. So then we get on a flight and we go to Memorial Sloan Kettering. This is the god temple of the entire world of oncology. We're sitting in a room about this big with a boardroom about half the number of people. And we're talking about our technology. They're talking about doing a $30 million pilot and all this kind of stuff. And my guys, I was a senior vice president, and my partner from PricewaterhouseCoopers was the CEO, 5 of us in the cab or a van. And we're going back to the airport, and everyone's high-fiving, saying, oh God, this is great, like you can practically take us to the bank. And I said to everyone, not that I was prescient, but I said to everyone, guys, we haven't earned the right to be here. We have not earned the right to be here. What I meant by that was, we don't know them, we don't know their personalities, they don't know us, they haven't physically tested our software. So everyone was counting the money before we had actually delivered an outcome. In other words, allowed Memorial Sloan Kettering to earn, or to realize the business benefit. So don't believe your own press. You know, earn the right to move to the next step like that pilot. Earn it by demonstrating the software does what they do, that you're integrated with their stuff and so on. The other thing is that you may have what you think is a great idea, and I really react in the med tech side, I react to this idea of looking for white space that no one else has ever done. Unfortunately, in the med tech sector, that's not necessarily, uniquely, it's not a recipe for success, because if you can't get it adopted by the people who actually pay people to buy technologies, then you're dead. So one of the ways we looked at that was if the market doesn't, quote, get your product, then some people will say, well, the market is stupid because we're so brilliant. The market is stupid that they don't get our product. And I had a colleague who actually believed that. That he used to say that the customers are stupid. But if the market doesn't get it, it's not because the market is stupid. The market is actually the market you're trying to meet the needs of. So perhaps your product is stupid or ill-conceived, or perhaps you need a new approach, a new channel, a new message. As an example, we created a piece of software that reduced their cost by 25% and increased their revenue by 30%. That sounds pretty damn good, doesn't it? And we said, well, we should therefore take a very modest 5% of your revenue. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Value-based pricing. Do you know that almost no one in the entire world does value-based pricing software? Almost no one in the world. Because people just can't get over the idea of handing over millions and millions of dollars to a company when the company just did what they think is like Microsoft Word or something like that. So just an example that you have to realize that sometimes your idea just won't fly, and you've got to be nimble and be able to change. One of the other good sayings that I like is, the best strategist has the most good options. And that's related to being nimble. If you're nimble and willing to change, if you don't have anything to change to, that's pretty useless. So an example that we had was, and it's also, it fits perfectly into David's comment about believing what you don't know. So in one of our projects, we surveyed 800, we got 800 responses from world-leading oncologists answering a 15-page detailed product requirements survey for us. What they liked, what they didn't like, the price points, and all this kind of stuff. 800 of the world's leading oncologists. And we thought, this is solid gold. And we built a product to meet exactly what this is. And our advisory board, all world-leading oncologists, and we thought, my God, this is a license to print money, it's great. And then what we realized a couple years later was that the world-leading oncologists are the ones who do the most clinical trials. The ones who do the most clinical trials are the ones who are most data-oriented, who are willing to deal with a whole bunch of data, a whole bunch of rigor that goes along with that. The vast majority of oncologists are trying to make money, get the patients in and out as quickly as humanly possible. They don't care about record keeping. They do the bare minimum of record keeping. They don't want any pain at all. The guys and gals we surveyed had no idea what the market is. None. Not only that,
The oncologists have no role in the decision-making of who buys the software. The old story of the user buyer, the economic buyer, and this is a real trial by fire. All the oncologist can say is no. He can't say yes to a deal. So we designed the product to meet exactly the wrong market. And then you get Memorial Sloan Kettering saying, wow, you guys are great. Again, they're an N of one. You know, they were the wrong guys. So it's always good to hear of failures as well as successes to know how you can get off track on some of these things. But the art of it is trying to figure out how to persevere on the game-changing aspects of your technology, but be willing to retest your hypothesis. Another company that we did said, look at that, there's a hole in the market. There's big here, big here, big here, big here. This is HIS, RIS, PACS, and transcription and other things in radiology. And there's this hole right here. My God, if we fill that hole and allow a radiologist to go right there and just by a click of a button, get everything all integrated, he does direct speech to text, and it just all comes out and it's all perfect. It's exactly, that meets the market need. We built that product. We got out there. Guess what we found out? Siemens owns this. GE owns that. These people, in other words, the distribution channels were all owned by these other big companies, and it was saturated the market. When they looked at our stuff, they said, yeah, your stuff is the greatest thing in the world. And we're building it. It's going to come out in about 3 or 4 years, or when the customers really need it, or whatever. But when you need to connect to all of my systems, and you can do it, I know you can do it, but no, I'm not going to let you. So we found that the distribution channel was completely and utterly owned by other companies that we couldn't control and the client couldn't control. And we were taking the diamond, we did the most sexy, interesting, valuable thing. So we stole all the value from the big companies. So they said, bye, we'll bury you. So then we had to be nimble and sell ourselves to one of those companies to get them up the curve. So, yeah, and I think the other one-liner, which is really good, is if you've got a good idea and you've got a good flexible platform technology, then you will be able to do everything under the sun. You'll, in theory, be able to do everything under the sun. Strategy is about what to take off the table, not what to do, because you can do 100 things and kill yourself. You've got to pick the best things to do, get them done, and again, earn the right to move to other adjacencies. So I think those are the main ones that I want to share with you. What I would like to do is, I've always found that these little anecdotes stay with me, and you can sort of use them in your reasoning and as new things show up in your business. I want to talk about several books. One is by Leonard Mlodinow, Fooled by Randomness. And it goes along with what Dave was saying, but it gives you a lot of very good examples how you can look at things differently and not be fooled by things what people call trends or others. So that one. Another one is by Nassim Taleb, The Black Swan. Again, talking about unusual events that you might have to plan for. It changes your view of statistics. Another one is by Roger Martin, called Fixing the Game. And if you want to talk about incentives, if you want to have your eyes open when you're building a company and looking at share value and looking at what people are buying and incenting, it's an excellent book on how large business is screwed up these days, and also on the ethics of business, and I found it extremely useful. On perseverance, there's a book by Eric Kandel, Nobel Prize winner in neurophysiology. It's called A New Model of Memory. And the reason I bring that up, it follows a 60-year journey, including a Nobel Prize, of how someone had an idea and followed all the paths and permutations and combinations and basically created neuroscience. But as an entrepreneur, when you follow this study, which is a tremendously engaging story, it gives you a sense of how you put all the pieces together and how you just have to follow your goal all the way along. And for innovators, and particularly in healthcare, Clayton Christensen, The Innovator's Prescription. The first 2/3 of the book are the best description of the difficulties of the health system and how to innovate it. And the last third is his solutions, which I don't like, so don't read the last third of the book. And for startups, I mean, again, these are not, you don't live by these things, but Jeffrey Moore's Living on the Fault Line, and John Nesheim's high-tech startup. Those are both excellent books that just talk about the general structure and dynamics of a startup. When should you hire what kind of people? How do you focus on R&D up front? And then as soon as you cross the chasm, you don't want to do R&D at all. You want to fix the product, specs and not change them and so on. So those books are all very good. And the one of the n equals 1. Now I'm going to undercut my own presentation. This n equals 1 idea is a big problem. And I heard a while ago, in fact it might have been related to time, I heard a successful developer of mobile apps talk about her practices. And the problem is that the real business model of mobile apps is you develop 1,000 of them, you throw them at the wall, and 1 or 2 of them will stick. And it's really hard to figure out which 1 or 2 out of 1,000 will stick. And the joke that Dilbert has is, Dilbert says, I'm going to develop a mobile app, and one of the other gals comes up and says, you know, I've got 2 lottery tickets. Here, you can have one. Look, I've just doubled the value of your company. So I'm an n equals 1, 2 in terms of my things, but I hope that some of these things, and particularly these books, which are distillations of a huge number of companies' practices and what worked and what didn't, I hope that's helpful and would be very interested. I do a lot of mentoring of people through the business and the investing that we do with the CEOs of our companies, and I'd be very happy through Ty to talk with anybody, particularly if you're in the med tech space.